The Navajo land buyback program has its roots entangled in history. To fully appreciate why begins as far back as the 1860s. The Navajo have lived and worked together on this land for centuries. It is here where their creation stories say that the first Navajo was born. And it is here where stories told by generations of Navajos are believed to have happened long ago. The Navajo have deep roots here in these alpine mountains, these scenic plateaus, valleys, unique landscapes. By ancient tradition, the Navajos were destined to live within the boundaries defined by the four sacred mountains. This land has a special quality, from the iconic and popular Monument Valley to clear mountain lakes, from the rugged canyons and the rocky spires to the fertile valleys, all long treasured by the Navajo people. Today, these lands have become world famous. They have come to represent America the Beautiful in the West. So, it is easy to understand why the Navajo have shown strong determination to keep possession of this land, now the largest reservation in America. Yet, in 1863, the U.S. cavalry used a harsh scorched earth campaign, burning peach tree orchards and killing livestock to force the Navajo off their chosen land. In their isolated position in Canyon de Chelly, the Navajo were not able to hold out against the Army's incursions into the canyon. They were forced to surrender. The weakened Navajos were then forced marched to Fort Wingate, then on to Fort Sumner. The episode was to become known as the Long Walk. Many of the very young, the elderly, and the sick died on the nearly 300-mile Long Walk. Pregnant women who could not keep up or who came to full term during the forced march were left behind to fend for themselves. Others were shot. The Navajo were assigned an area near Fort Sumner to till the soil called Bosque Redondo. It was officially called a reservation, but to the conquered and exiled Navajos, it was a deplorable prison camp. There they were subjected to raids by hostile tribes and experienced hunger when their crops were devastated by cutworm. The intention was that the Navajo would learn to be self-sufficient farmers, but conditions became so bad that the United States government was forced to feed the Navajos at great expense. And the officer in charge of the Navajo was dismissed and replaced by the Civil War veteran General Sherman. Sherman was appalled by what he found, and he met with the Navajo leaders to discuss an alternative place for the Navajo to live. He was moved by the articulate and passionate Barboncito, who was known by his fellow Navajos as the orator and the blessing speaker.
The bringing of us here has caused a great decrease of our numbers. Many of us have died, also a great number of our animals. Our grandfathers had no idea of living in any other country except our own, and I do not think it right for us to do so. When the Navajos were first created, 4 mountains and 4 rivers were pointed out to us, inside of which we should live. That was to be our country, and was given to us by first woman of the Navajo tribe. First woman gave us this piece of land and created it specially for us, and gave us the whitest of corn and the best of horses and sheep.
The Treaty of Bosque Redondo established the Navajo Reservation, and the Navajos were allowed to return to the lands of their choosing in 1868. An estimated 4,500 Navajo returned to their homelands from Bosque Redondo. And together with some 2,500 Navajo who had evaded capture by hiding out in the Grand Canyon area, Navajo numbered about 7,000. But returning to their homelands did not end their struggles. In 1876, a coalition of Plains tribes in Montana attacked, defeated, and killed General Armstrong Custer and all of his men in the Battle of the Little Bighorn near modern-day Billings, Montana. White settlers, eager for revenge and finding an excuse to take Indian land by force or by legal deception, increased their efforts at the expense of Indians. But Henry Dawes, a U.S. Senator determined to stop the land grab, pushed through Congress the Dawes Act. He believed that the long-term survival of Indians in America would require legal land ownership by individual Indians. At a time when European settlers were enthusiastic about owning land in America, especially in the territorial West, Dawes wanted Indians to secure legal land deeds and be a part of the American landowning dream, and in that way learn how to profit from land ownership. This, he believed, would Americanize Indians who could no longer roam the lands that they had hunted and gathered and grazed for generations. Now there were boundaries and restrictions, and Indians would have to learn to live within their designated areas. The Dawes Act carved Indian country into lots, often of 160 acres, and distributed them among the heads of household who, in time, would own the allotments. The unforeseen consequences of the Dawes Act are being experienced to this day. The first consequence was that the size of many reservations defined by earlier treaties were larger than the lands that were allotted. The U.S. government declared that Indian lands that remained after the allotments were assigned to Indians were surplus and were open for non-Indian settlers to purchase. Within 25 years, some reservations were reduced by more than 40%. Over the course of time, later generations inherited the allotments. So, while the number of allotments remained the same, the number of Indians that owned a single allotment grew. In the case of the Navajo, for example, the population growth rose from 7,000 Navajo in 1868 to more than 300,000 today. To put that into perspective, the population of the United States as a whole grew from just more than 50 million in 1868 to just more than 300 million today, a growth rate of 600%. Comparatively, the population growth of Navajos is an astounding 4,000% during the same period. Considering that expansion in population, it is easy to understand how some allotments have hundreds of owners. This situation of multiple owners of a single allotment, each of whom own a fraction of an allotment, is known as fractionated land or fractionation. Fractionation has become a serious issue. While most allotment owners realize very little from their ownership, and many do not live on the land, anyone who wishes to improve their allotment must gain the permission of 51% of landowners if adjacent allotments must be dug across to improve a road, or to install a gas line, or to run water to a property that is underserved. The difficulty is made more complicated by the fact that Navajos now live in 49 different states and in 2 foreign countries. This has often resulted in preventing Navajos who want to build a home or a business on their allotments to give up hope and to abandon their plans.
These people have oil wells pumping on their land, but they're living in shacks. Eloise Cobell.
It was difficult for Eloise Cobell, a member of the Blackfoot tribe in Browning, Montana, to understand or to accept that Indian country was producing significant money for large companies, but Indians living in the very shadows of the oil derricks were living in impoverished conditions. She wanted to understand how it was possible, and she began to lobby the government to explain why the income generated from Indian lands were not benefiting needy Indians to the extent that she believed they deserved. Unable to get the government to provide satisfactory accounting for the income from Indian trust assets, she initiated a lawsuit against the Department of the Interior in 1996. She persisted for 14 long years. Finally, on December 8, 2009, the government announced that it had reached a settlement in the trust case. It was a victory for Indian country, and it is one of the largest government settlements in U.S. history. On December 8, 2010, President Obama signed into law a settlement of $1.5 billion to be paid to 300,000 individual Indian money account holders, with another $1.9 billion made available to pay individual Indians who want to sell their small fractionated interest at fair market value and return the land back into tribal trust lands.
And I signed into law the historic Cobell settlement, leading to the land buyback program, a $1.9 billion fund to consolidate individual Indian lands and restore them to tribal trust lands. So let's put our minds together to build more economic opportunity in Indian country, because every American, including every Native American, deserves the chance to work hard and get ahead. Everybody. That means creating more jobs, because young people should be able to live and work and raise a family right here in the land of your fathers and mothers.
Eloise Cobell died on October 16, 2011, at the age of 65. The governor of Montana, Steve Bullock, has proclaimed her birthday, November 5th, to be Eloise Cobell Day in her honor.
Growing up, I saw many families who didn't have access to water or power. In many cases, allotments remain idle because there are so many owners and there's usually no consensus as to what is to be done with that land. If the Navajo Nation acquired majority interest, then a landowner would just have to obtain consent or approval from fewer landowners. The Cobell settlement it really creates a historic opportunity for not only tribes but to individuals. I think that this opportunity may be a one-time opportunity for some individuals. As we implement the program, we are learning from other tribes about how trust lands can be useful to others. And I think that that's how the Navajo sees this. They see this as an opportunity to create, whether it's housing, infrastructure, roads. By consolidating lands, they can then offer such services to their people.
The way that the whole program works is they're going to do a mass appraisal, and based on that mass appraisal, they will look at what is on your land, whether there's vegetation, whether it's good for farming, if there's water on there, all of those things will be considered, and that will be in the valuation of the land.
What the government is doing is they're buying up undivided interest. The parcel, it stays 160 acres, or however the size the allotment is. It doesn't change it. What you're selling is your percentage of the interest that you had to the title. So if I had a 2% interest in the title and I sell it to the Navajo Nation or to the government, that acquisition of the title will be 2% of the title, not 2 acres or specific acreage of the allotment.
Landowners are going to know more about their land. They're going to know whether or not there is the potential of minerals. They're going to also walk away with knowing what the fair market value is of their land. And if anything, they're going to know where their land is. They're going to know more about how many owners are on that allotment. With the land buyback program, the landowners are going to receive a $75 base payment, and the base payment is intended to compensate them for the time and energy it takes for them to complete the offer packet. If they own the minerals to the land, a $7.50 per acre administrative payment is being added to compensate them for the conveyance of the mineral rights. And in addition to the mineral payment, landowners will also receive the fair market value so long as they own the surface estate. Through a thorough analysis by a certified appraiser, a value is then determined and placed on a tract of land.
Once you get an offer package, that will allow you to know what the value of the land is, and it will the offer package will also let you know what you'll be offered.
Landowners will receive an individual offer for the interest they own individually, and that individual will have the option to sell some, all, or none of their interests.
If the nation is an allottee on that allotment and they want to live there, that's something that they still have to work out with the Navajo Nation, BIA, and all the other allottees that are on there. If you don't have an existing residential lease and you are residing on the land presently, we do encourage people to contact BIA Realty to start working on a lease. However, if you already have a residential lease on there, the lease agreement will be honored by the Navajo Nation.
If an individual has a very, very, very small interest, they feel that it's unlikely that they would ever acquire or be able to obtain whole ownership of the tract. And since they have a very small percentage, they are willing to sell it back to the tribe. So then that way the tribe can then make more beneficial use of the land. And say, for instance, if they're just getting 1 cent a year, it would take a very long time for them to receive the amount of compensation that we are offering them. We are not forcing any landowners to sell their interests. Participation in the program is purely voluntary, so please take the time out to learn more about the land buyback program, because the program will only exist for a limited period of time, and we want to make sure that landowners are well educated.
The fractionation of land ownership is not easily resolved, but the Navajo people have faced and overcome many challenges together. It will take many allotment owners willing to consider participation for many reasons, including for the good of the tribe as a whole. All allotment interests purchased by the federal government are transferred to the tribe and become Navajo tribal trust lands. The Navajo Land Buyback Program opens the way for a better future for the Navajo. With 40% of the population under the age of 16, the Navajo are poised for continued population growth. The young who want to remain on the reservation to raise their families will need jobs, homes, and businesses. Participating in the Navajo Buyback Program will help make that hope attainable.
Thank you.